This is part 2 of my 25 years of Native Instruments walkthrough of my competition entry. In this episode, I'll be finishing up tweaking the instruments and beginning the composition and production process. I'm going to start tweaking the acoustic drums. I'm going to start out with a pretty typical clicky metal kick drum. Okay, pretty happy with that. Move on to the snare. To the hi-hat. I'm going to move on to the toms. On to the cymbals. And on to the room. Okay, that sounds with the rest of the drum mix. Create a kind of a rough mix of the drums. Drag a limiter over all of those. Should add a lot more punch. Okay, that's a nice start for the acoustic drums. I'm going to move on to the synth drums. Just the same deal, starting with the kick drum. And on to the snare. Tweak that snare. I'm going to create some kind of percussion instrument here. Probably just claps. So now we have claps. And I'm going to tweak this snare too. Yep, tweaking the first snare as well. Okay, there you go, new snares. All right, I'm going to set up an effects end for the electronic drums. The synth drums will have a little bit of ambience. Onto the hi-hat. Okay, now for the toms. And the cymbals. Drag a bunch of limiters over these as well. Okay, that's a good starting point for those as well. Now I'm going to move on to the electric bass. I'm going to be using Amplitude to affect the bass as well. This one just sounds good right out of the gate. Mess with it a bit. I'm going to split the signal and run the DI into something else. So it's kind of like a cleaned up DI. I'll work on the other side, which will be probably distortion. See how that sounds along with the non-distorted version. to change the room for this one to an amp closet and mess with the mics a bit. So those sound together. Bring the DI back. Okay, I think I can work with that. Okay, I'm going to feed that to some console emulation. And yep, you guessed it. Limiter after that. Synth bass. Follow that up with R bass. Add some harmonics. Right, I'm going to move on and check the guitars again. I'm going to mute my mic and check guitars on my monitors. Yeah, I think I'm going to add some emulation between the amp and cab and the brick wall on the guitars. I got to listen through my monitors though, so muting the mic again. I think that adds some definition that was missing. I'm going to work on the other one. Yeah, that one needed to be beefed up a little. I want to see how they sound together. All right, that works for me. I'm going to move on to the synths. I think I'm just going to do some just general EQ, and I have some ideas for going a little bit lo-fi on this. Okay, next synth. This one needs a little modulation and maybe some delay. Just going to throw a mix box on here and see if that'll cover it. Move on to the next synth. All right, I'm going to do some lo-fi stuff to this one. All right, moving on to the next synth. Yeah, it seems like it needs a little modulation. To mix box. How about phaser? All right, on to the last synth. This is a rhythmic synth, so work on EQ first and then something to emphasize the rhythmic portions of it. All right, I think that kind of works. I think that does it for the basic mix. Now I'm going to actually start the composition phase. Sort of take a anything goes approach in my composition style. Work chromatically and experiment with unique scales and chords. I'll often mix up rhythm styles using polyrhythms and odd meters. My overall production style is equally open-ended in terms of mashing together genres and instrumentation types. My composition workflow, however, is very A to B. I start with the intro and work my way through linearly all the way to the outro. All right, I'm going to try to construct some kind of cool sounding intro. And I think I'm just going to start with the RHYTHMIC synth, construct an overall rhythm, and then maybe pull it apart, do something weird. Somehow that works. I'm going to slow this whole thing down. Add some hi-hat. Bass guitar. Emphasize the bass and guitars with some acoustic drums. Maybe that'll pull this together a little more. Try that for now. Hi-hat here as well. Just an off hit. I'm going to deconstruct it. That's like the skeleton of the intro. I'll go in and refine it and tweak it a lot. I've gone through the intro and I've changed a bunch of stuff. Really messed with the synth drums. I did this lo-fi thing with cassette and vinyl. I've added a little melody on this last part. And I've added another stock preset. I'm just going to break it down to like percussion and bass, maybe substitute synth bass for the bass guitar. Okay, so the transition works. It's close. Pretty solid. I think I'll move on to the next part. That's pretty cool. Gonna need some really sparse, chuggy guitars in this part. Gonna be adding some acoustic guitars. All right, on to the next part. All right, I need kind of a dive bomb synth right here. With the end of this episode, you should have a pretty good idea of my basic production process. I've got a nice start to this track, and we'll be finishing everything up in part 3.